Just want to do one last thing. What we're doing here, this is all amplifying the voice. So if you are in Colorado and you want your voice amplified and you talk about blockchain, we would love to have you come out. So that's my Twitter. Follow it and connect with me and we'll get you up here to do it. So without further ado, we're going to do 6 lightning talks tonight. The first one up is my friend Jason Hartgrave. Jason is the Chief Marketing Officer at Jalapeno Inventive, sorry. It's based in Fort Collins, and his presentation tonight is called Making Moves Towards Adoption of Crypto. So come on up, Jason.
All right, I think I can do this. So, the title of my talk, it's not really a technical presentation, so it's okay. We're gonna ease up into things. I'm talking about making moves towards mass adoption of crypto, because it's always like, when is it gonna happen? When is it gonna happen? What are the factors behind it? So I like to take this in a slightly different direction than a lot of people and kind of point it back. Why are you here? Why are you here tonight? You could do so many different things with your time. You could be watching the news, sitting at home, playing with your kids, but yet you're here at Decentralize Colorado. Something about the blockchain space or some project that you're working on was so compelling that you had to come out and network with other people and see what's going on. As if there's not enough to consume on Twitter or other social media channels or white papers to read, but there's a certain social component and it really kind of spoke to you. And maybe that's why you're here. But when you're thinking about mass adoption, you might think, well, what brought me into this space? What excites me about the blockchain? So I would say that when it comes to mass adoption, everybody is really a piece of the puzzle. If you think about it, what if you just turn it towards you? What if you were the only evangelist for the blockchain? Would you still do it? Would it still appeal to you? Would you like it? Probably so. Well, you are that key to change. So here's what you don't want to be. You don't want to be the doctor that smokes. You don't want to be somebody that is a little bit into the blockchain, but maybe you're really trying as hard to convince other people to get into it, but maybe in fact you really haven't fully adopted it right now yourself. And what does that mean? Does it mean that, well, you're just not blockchain enough to be a part of the movement? No, but there's different levels of adoption that perhaps you haven't even thought of yourself. So have you made your commitment to crypto? This is coming from a famous movie. A lot of people have seen it. Glengarry Glen Ross. Alex Baldwin comes in. There's a bunch of sales guys. This is a high-pressure sales environment, and they're complaining. The leads are bad. Everything's bad. And Alex Baldwin comes in and he says, "Are you committed?" And he's like, "Look at this watch. This is my commitment to crypto," right? He's like, "Look at the size of this watch." But what could you do? Is maybe say like a wallet on your phone. So maybe you could show somebody what a wallet looks like. Have you downloaded any sort of applications to your phone? What about even like wearing a piece of clothing that starts a conversation with a Bitcoin symbol? I mean, it's really interesting that like when I see somebody with a piece of flair or a sticker on their car or something like that, I want to meet them. I want to know them. I'm like, oh man, you're into this thing too? I'm so excited about it, right? What about, just supporting the meetups that we have, like with Decentralized Colorado? Are you buying the stickers, the shirts? I see a guy with the Boulder blockchain shirt on. He's committed. He's committed, right? What about buying a little bit of crypto? Maybe just like something, I don't know, something small, like some sort of like small altcoin, like Dogecoin or Flappy or something like that, just to give it away to other people that might be interested in getting involved with crypto. I know the founder of Jalapeno Inventive really got started when somebody gave him some Dogecoin. And guess what, guys? How many people here have like some sort of crypto at all? So lots. There's still a couple hands I didn't see, so there's maybe some room here. Everybody that wants to, I'm gonna give you some Dogecoin tonight. You can get some. I want to share. Imagine when you were growing up. Do you remember maybe like one of your relatives gave you like a savings bond, right? It was like some sort of thing. Oh, you know what? When he gets old enough, you're taught how to save. Maybe you got some play money. Maybe you played Monopoly. Well, couldn't you get people that? Maybe a little bit of crypto? What about gifts? Like, how many people have birthdays? You can just give them some crypto. Then, oh, what do I do with this? Oh, well, let me tell you what to do with it, right? And it starts all these conversations, getting people into the space. So I mentioned Doge is sort of like one of those coins that don't cost a lot, but you can spread it around. The whole idea is, and if you look at a chart, you'll see that Bitcoin really took off a lot. And the whole space sort of benefited from having this small coin that people could just distribute to others to get them in there. But what about like trying and using dApps? Who is a little bit, here in the audience, like who's a little bit upset maybe that there's some censorship going on in some of the major social media platforms? Like that's a big topic. Like you have Facebook clamping down on different groups, free speech perhaps dying. Well, how many people have actually like tried to sign up to maybe a different alternative dApp site like Minds or Steemit or give people some alternatives? What about volunteering for the space? And if you're an entrepreneur or you're a business, have you started accepting crypto yet? See, in order to get mass adoption, a lot of people that provide goods and services, maybe somebody like you, have to be that person that pulls the trigger. So this little quote, what you do has far greater impact than what you say. So if you're walking the walk, at least have like a wallet on your phone so you can show some people. Maybe try and get a couple more people into this space. Conversations in crypto culture. So how does this sound? One note. How many people have gone into like a Telegram channel or something and there's always two words, win moon, right? Win moon. It always becomes a conversation about the price of crypto. And when you do that and people are interested in the price, you sleep, or it's like deja vu. Like, is this the only thing about blockchain that people talk about? Is it the only way to talk about this topic? And I would venture no, it's not. I would say change the conversation, expand the conversation, right? Make it all about the values. When you're trying to tell somebody about the blockchain, forget that it has any sort of financial incentive whatsoever. What does it do for society when everybody can trust everybody and it's based on math? Crazy awesome things, right? What about transparency in society? Like when there's an immutable record that everybody has, nobody's cooking the books, right? What about the security aspect of it? What about your freedom of speech? You can't be censored anymore. These are really things that attract people to this space. Has nothing to do with price, everything to do with transforming society in a major way outside of the tech. The obligatory disclaimer is, when it comes to mass adoption, we're way over here, which is kind of good news and bad news because we're still in this innovator space. And if you want to discover really how mass adoption happens, there's a lot you can read from this guy. But overall, we're way over here. Crypto is nowhere close to really mass adoption. We're still in the innovator stage, which is really cool because we can come up with great new innovative ways to facilitate mass adoption faster. So hacking reality. Well, the reality is we're still over here in this early adopter category. We're working out the kinks, there's UX issues, but really we can take everything that drives people. Like say the political conversation, there's transparency. What's the drawbacks? Well, there's some regulations that have to change. This happens. But when you're selling it to somebody else, you could say, well, imagine that this is a technology that allows a facilitation and trust of transactions without anybody else. The math is proving it. When it comes to social issues, people are concerned about privacy and security. So yeah, some people are getting hacked, but imagine that you could monitor all your transactions and you could know that your bank is legit. All right, so the conclusion, I don't really have a big technical pitch here, but here's what I believe in. I believe really that we can rise together faster if we embrace our unique voice and our passion in the space. What brought you in? Is it the same thing that might bring in your friend? Maybe not, but there's a lot of topics that you can pick from to help them adopt. My company, the Jalapeno Inventive, what we're doing, our mission statement is this. We're empowering the crypto economic evolution through two mediums, education and entertainment. You can always talk about it. You can always help other people enjoy the space. And let's try and make it fun. Let's try and make it fun. So that's it, guys. That's it.
All right, this is my friend Daniel Glouser. Daniel's the founder of Cadmium Consulting, Decentralized Technologies, and a developer at District Zero. District Zero X, sorry about that. He was going to explore the intersections of blockchain technology and functional programming. So take it away, Daniel. I got that, Dave.
Mic check, mic check. Cool. Hi, I'm Daniel Glauser, and we're going to talk about functional programming and the blockchain. Specifically, we're going to go over functional programming and Solidity. Is everyone familiar with Solidity? Anyone not? It is the language for writing smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain. So as Will mentioned, I'm a founder of Decentralized Technology and currently a developer on the team at District Zero X. So I spend my days working in a language called Clojure, which is it's a dynamic functional language based off of Lisp. It's a new version of a 50-year-old programming language, and I run a local group here in Denver called the Den of Clojure. I even have one of my regulars here. Thanks for coming. And I also spend the other half of my time working in Solidity. So let's talk about functional programming a little bit. Is everyone familiar with the concept? Is anyone not? There's going to be a quiz if everyone says yes. All right. So some ideas of functional programming. You typically have functions as first-class citizens. You have something called lambdas, which are anonymous or sometimes called inline functions. You have this idea called higher order functions that we'll go over a little more in depth. But pretty much functions can be passed around. They can be sent as arguments to other functions, and you can do things with them. And then there's this notion of immutable data. That's common in functional programming, but isn't necessarily have to be part of functional programming. It's just in almost every functional language. And it's a concept you might be familiar with. So let's talk about lambdas, those inline anonymous functions. I took a look in Solidity and, oops, not supported yet. So that doesn't get us too far. So thanks for coming, folks. I appreciate your time. No, we're going to do a little better than that. Let's take a look at this notion of immutable data. Anyone familiar with an immutable data structure commonly used in the blockchain space? Called the blockchain? Yeah, the blockchain itself is an immutable distributed database. And in the Clojure space, we're actually pretty familiar with the concept. We've been working with immutable distributed databases for quite a while. And the blockchain is a really good one. In fact, some of the work we do at District Zero X, we use the blockchain as this immutable distributed database, and we keep our most important state there. So when we spin up our servers, they just call a Solidity contract, get the data out of the blockchain, and voila. I don't have to spin up a whole rack of servers in a data center somewhere. I don't have to spin up a bunch of VMs on EC2. I can pull the data right there when I need it, and it's always available. How many nodes is it available on? Anyone know how many are in the Ethereum network right now? I think it's like about 25 last I checked. So that's pretty good replication, would you say? 25,000 computers it's replicated on. But this I thought was a really good blog entry where Sebastian just talks about the blockchain and its properties as an immutable data structure and being distributed. So something to take a look at. that's just too easy. Like, I could stop there and be like, the blockchain, it's immutable, functional, yay, we've done it. No, we're not gonna. We're gonna go a little further. So, let's talk about higher order functions. Something I said we'd talk a little about, a little more about, a little foreshadowing there. We're gonna dive in. So this is a project I'm working on at District 0X. It's called Meme Factory. If you want to create the best and dankest memes available, you will have the opportunity to do it. Not only can you create them, but you can curate them, and you can stake dank tokens towards what you think is the best meme. Yeah, it's a funny one in Colorado, isn't it? But we've all familiar with the term dank memes, right? All right, anyway. So there's this notion that you can stake your tokens. We're creating a token curated registry, a TCR, to allow people to say what the best memes are and to say what the not so best memes are. And with the token curated registry, if you're not familiar with it, you are literally putting your money where your mouth is, because if you submit some memes and people vote them up, you get tokens. And if they challenge them or vote them down, you don't get tokens. So kind of a neat idea. Some of the details, this uses an open source Solidity project called Mini-Me that allows you to clone an ERC20 token as a starting point and build upon it. It's actually really good. And one of the earlier speakers was talking about the community. This is part of it. Like, the community is giving away good software to allow you to base your systems on. So the Mini-Me token is kind of neat. The brain change that got me thinking about higher order functions actually happened Friday. I'm only a couple weeks into this job, and I'm working with one of the other developers, and I asked a question about the execution flow in the project, where instead of just calling from our closure code into the Solidity contract that we want, we're calling into a different one, but passing it the information and the extra data of the contract we want. And that's where it hit me. This notion of a higher order function doesn't work as well. You can pass functions around in Solidity, but the real power is when you think about the address type in Solidity. It allows you can pass an address in and you can say call. You can call a different address. You can call from there. So that's where the higher order part comes in. You can call a function in a contract and tell it to call another contract. And where that comes into play, you see here's an example from the Solidity code, this extra data that I've highlighted. That's where what gets passed in is the actual contract I want to call. And we can do validation there. We can do authentication there. We can do all sorts of things. It gives us a strong hook before we call into the contract that we're looking for. That allows us to build simpler layered systems, which is also a cornerstone of functional programming. And that's it. My name's Daniel Glauser. You can find me on Twitter. There's a link to district0x.io's website. And there's an email if you want to ask me any questions. Thank you. Speaking of questions, does anyone have any? Please respect the mic or I'll just repeat you. And I won't sound as good. So.
I was just wondering if you had some background knowledge on why Mini-Me was chosen over, say, like an Open Zeppelin ERC20 based contract.
So today I started my third week working with Solidity and working with these folks, so I have no idea.
I thought that might be the case.
Yeah. So what were the two other ones? Because I want to look into them now.
An alternative to Mini-Me, I think, would be an Open Zeppelin. They have base contracts that you can extend from, such as an ERC21 or ERC721. They have a bunch that are like vigorously reviewed for security and best practices and stuff. So.
Cool. And are there any advantages that you know of over Mini-Me?
This is the first time I've heard of Mini-Me. So,
Okay. So those things could be true for Mini-Me too. You're
Yeah,
just not.
absolutely.
All right, cool. All right, well, thanks for pointing those out. Any other
Anyone else?
questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Which is up?
Next up, we have Jeremy Black. And Jeremy is for one of the first multi-manager hedge funds in Colorado and developed software for managing risks in stock and bond portfolios. Jeremy's also developed one of the first internet search engines before Google was even a household name. And he's going to talk today about graph databases, right, and blockchain?
GraphQL.
GraphQL.
Well, and a bigger topic.
Anyway, take it away, Jeremy.
So you missed one real special point, though, and that was that Al Gore and I invented the internet. So one of the first things I did out of graduate school was I taught philosophy, and I learned two philosophical truths. One is philosophy doesn't bake any bread. But secondly, that we're all beggars searching for truth, and we're kind of looking for crumbs under the table of truth. And what I find interesting in the development space is now with open source and all that, we're all getting crumbs from a lot of places now that we weren't getting it before. And it's really a great time to be in the development space. And part of the talk I'm giving today is from another talk, a broad talk on the fiction, the force, and the future of money. So you'll see where that fits in. First of all, money is a fiction. It's a social construct. We don't monkey around with our money. In fact, you don't see animals generally doing what this guy's doing here, hoarding his money. That's just not something animals do, but we as human beings do move in that direction. Now, how many have heard of the island of Yap? Okay, a few of you. It's sort of talked about in the Bitcoin space. But generally, there's an island that a community of people a long time ago, they would collect money, and their money was this big Yap stone. And it's kind of, our conception of money that's easy to transport and do all that. Well, this particular form of money is very difficult to transport. And when someone did actually mine it from an island about 300 miles away, they would transport it by outrigger canoe to their island and put it at their house. And everyone would basically know who owned what stones, because you'd have it in front of your house. No one told you not to leave your money laying around. And all the people would have connections and think about who owed who what and who owned what stone. And even if the stone didn't move, everyone had a mental notation about what that money was worth. And so basically there was a story where one of the outriggers was coming back with one of these big stones, and during a storm it fell in the ocean. And Bill, we'll call him Bill, said, "Man, I had this big stone and it fell in the ocean." And everyone made a notation of it in their minds and said, even though it's at the bottom of the ocean, we'll still let you use that as money. And so you could use it to have a dowry for your daughter or whatever form of money that you wanted. But one of the big objections you get about cryptocurrency is what? They go, "What is it? It's vapor. It's not real." And I said, well, it's sort of like that stone at the bottom of the ocean. When you pay your electric bill and you just push a button on your computer and it sends ones and zeros over to that electric company, basically that money at the bottom of the ocean has now been moved to the electric company. Well, Facebook faced a similar problem. When they had more and more people, and we had to keep track of friends, had to keep track of likes, had to keep track of friends, and going deeper and deeper. In the computer science, we call it the turtles all the way down problem. There's so much data that had to be tracked that they had to come up with a way to do it efficiently, where they could pull data, specific data out from the cloud, from all these relationships that they wanted, not just dump data into the thing. And they created something called GraphQL. And GraphQL, instead of using, and I wasn't sure on what the audience was, so I didn't want to go in deep on the REST versus GraphQL, but basically it creates a smart endpoint where you can grab data by just going to one endpoint, ask for exactly what you want, and it will pull that data forward for you to use. So an API first design basically allows you then to have this good balance between something that's a human readability and machine readability. And so, I hear myself talking. So GraphQL is sort of like your personal assistant. You basically tell the personal assistant the address of everything that you need, and they know that. And then when it comes time to get something, all you do is say, hey, get me some eggs, my laundry, and a card from my mother-in-law. And they just go do that and deliver you those items. And so as the cloud gets more and more complicated with all these things, we're basically able to get the data that we need, when we need it, in a declarative way. And so who's using GraphQL now? Well, Facebook, Git's using it, Pinterest, Intuit, and a lot of companies. Now, when I started building my first crypto tracker wallet, I said, okay, I'm going to use GraphQL. That's the cool thing to do. And then I discovered, and I started to do it with Mongo, Express, and Node. But I discovered this other company called Bitgur. Anybody heard of Bitgur? They have all the data that I wanted. They did heat maps. They did. They looked at the currency levels. It's interesting that Bitcoin's the 5th largest currency in terms of volume in the world. And if you go farther down, anyway, they have all this information. They're literally pulling data from dozens and dozens of places and putting together in a fast fashion for you to be able to know what's going on in the space. So the key question is always, who do you trust? So on the island of Yap, you know, it was a small community, everyone kind of knew each other. But here's Jon Snow, right? Game of Thrones. Who do you trust in Game of Thrones? Nobody. Jon Snow, okay? So many connections. And now with big data, now we've got AI and we've got graph data. We need to know how we're going to trust what we're getting and what the records are and what's going on out there. So we're trusting the code. And we call that a trustless environment. Not that it's not trustful, but it's that we don't have to have an intermediary. We just know that it will be recorded out there and transparent. And the blockchain is a way to do that. So we were talking about that earlier. The blockchain is a place where that is codified and recorded and immutable, so we can trust it. Now, one of the areas that I know that I'm more familiar with is, like, we've gone from Bitcoin, and then we've gone to Ethereum, and now we're on level 3. And one of those level 3 places is EOS. EOS has a lot of dApps that are being developed now in the EOS platform. And what was interesting is they also have, anybody familiar with the interplanetary file system? So they've combined, they're building a hosting environment that uses the interplanetary file system along with GraphQL. GraphQL is basically sorting through all that hash stuff and making it very accessible for us to use the blockchain for storing data, and as well as a client called Apollo, which also uses the GraphQL technology. So we're really on an intellectual event horizon with the crypto and with the blockchain, and there's real exciting things coming down the pike right now. If you look at this, we see that with IoT, there's going to be nodes everywhere with self-driving cars, with you've got, you know, your lights in your garage being turned on, all those IoT things, and it sort of looks kind of like Skynet. So people are a little bit worried about that. But it also looks like a neural network. This is your brain's neurons firing and connected with each other. And more as we begin to look at different aspects of our universe, they're all connected in these kinds of ways. So back when I was doing research in econometrics and we were messing around with neural networks, we had trained neural networks and we had genetic algorithms to help train the networks, and then we had self-learning networks. So back when I was doing it, the computers were a lot slower than they are now. And of course, this brings up the thing that everyone's afraid of, the singularity. brings up images of the Terminator and bad things happening. But the truth is, this is a time where we can really apply what we've learned. We know that we can build a better future using the tools that we have available to us that are growing right now. I learned some new tools tonight that are available. And boy, I switched this over to PowerPoint. It's all screwed up. But anyway, you can be part of that, building a better future for all of us in the blockchain. Thank you.
Hunter is the co-founder and CTO of InnoTrade.io and ArcJet.io. And his presentation today, which is looks like it's speeding through, is basically the background on InnoTrade and ArcJet.
Yeah, there we go. Cool. So this button? Cool. Okay. Yeah, so hi, so I want to tell you about a technology that I've been working on that might save you a lot of money on gas and your users a lot of money, and also, if it works out, might just make it so dApps only need the blockchain just for money. So this is going to be a big download, so hang in there. May go quickly. I'll make this presentation available for later. Hi, I'm Hunter. I'm a builder, web app dev. Maybe not as long as Jeremy, but few years. I have a focus on front end mostly, but I'm a full stack developer. I've done just about everything. I recently got into blockchain and dApps, and that said, though, I'm not a security expert by any means. So I'm just going to lay that out there. Just be very aware and critical of the things I'm about to say. Also, this is my cat. He's great cat. So InnoTrade. Earlier this year, I started a project with a team, and we had a lot of purpose. It was very ambitious. We worked very hard on our front end and built the majority of our dApp. However, we ran out of seed money sooner than expected, so we had to get day jobs instead so we can continue to work sustainably. My co-founder later asked if I could teach him JavaScript so he could finish it himself. And I was like, cool, of course I can teach JavaScript. So we've been busting ass building, working on the next level dApp all on nights and weekends. So what is our goal with InnoTrade? To provide an easy-to-use dApp, easy-to-use dApp to people who want to start projects or community projects in their community or crowdfunding projects, gather community contractors willing to work on those projects. Then they could earn money held in a stable coin and then track contributions to earn equity tracked in tokens on those projects. And then you'll allow investment in those projects also tracked in tokens. And then you'll incubate and develop good ideas into workable projects, and maybe even reinforce a good community by highlighting accomplishments and earning reputation. In order to do that, we built a TypeScript React Redux dApp with some Solidity smart contracts, and we tried to use Swarm to store our data, but Swarm fell short. It would lose our data, and each smart contract gas prices were still high, and we still would have to ask our users to install MetaMask, and we felt like the barrier to entry for dApps is just incredibly high these days, and so I decided to build a database, and so I built an object data store, kind of like S3 or Amazon Google Storage, cloud storage. It's distributed, so anyone can run a copy and contribute to the network and be trusted and paid by the network to participate. We think we can do a better job than the other projects doing a data store. I'm not a security expert, but I realized we were making sure that the data we were storing on this potentially adversarial network, Swarm, was both verified by the client insurance integrity and also signed so we know who it belongs to. In fact, if anybody were to compromise their copy of Swarm or the gateway server or something, and then just send us garbage data, then their own data, a lot of people aren't actually hashing the data back that they get back from IPFS or Swarm. And so if you don't actually hash it again through the hash that is used to hash it in the first place to give you the SHA, and technically Swarm is a little different, than that because it's a peer-to-peer network, not quite a kind of addressable storage like IPFS. And so all that kind of amounts to the fact that we don't really know, or we don't give ourselves the tools or allow us to check to see if that data is secure. And so what we did was we do front-end citing and public key verification. We give the front-end the means to create its own keys. We do hashing on the client of kind of addressable data. And we also incentivize people to grow the storage instead of just serving the most popular data. So a note on DHTs, let me just explain what that's all about. A hash table is a means of storing and retrieving a data record by the hash of its data. A hash is a very large number that is a representation of that data produced by an algorithm. Well, you can read it all, but later. But the idea is that you got a distributed hash table, which is like a means of distributing your data based on hashes of data that you put in. So when you put in the data, you get a hash, and then when you want to check that hash, you can run that algorithm on the client, and you can double check that and verify that. So I want to give us the tools to keep us safe. The key difference between traditional DHTs like Swarm and IPFS is really the client library. Unless the client has the tools to validate the data themselves, the client can never truly trust the data it retrieves from a potentially adversarial server. This could be game-changing for providing browsers and application developers the capability to not only know in real time when requested data is tampered with, but also allows us to trust operators with serving data for your applications that we normally wouldn't consider trusting before, such as your mom's laptop or some Jamie wrestler in Germany. And so, let me tell you more about our database. It runs on Node, written in TypeScript. It's easier to write than CB Go or Rust. Records are hashed and verified entirely on the client. The backend is intentionally thin since it could potentially be compromised. The user has incentive to trust themselves, and site owners trust their users generally. So data uploaded for a site is associated to and paid for by a site. Data that is not paid for, say by malicious actors, is eventually removed from the network or removed by operators or blacklisted by operator blacklists. Least recently used data incentivization, which is contrast with Swarm, and site operator rewards are currently kept track of by smart. But the idea is that you incentivize people to store data longer term, and so you want to incentivize people to use the least recently used data, to serve the most least recently used data, so they earn more by serving older data and less popular data. And that helps them grow their storage and makes it more so you're not serving the most recently used data like Swarm or IPFS, which is interesting because they'll just, it gives them permission basically to garbage collect your data after a while. Another mesh networks. Mesh networks have been incredibly popular lately. ArcJet actually started originally as a project to put single-board computers with storage in it around the city. We weren't even connected to the internet. They would form a new kind of distributed web. But I soon realized that we needed, regardless of the hardware solution, we needed a database to store that data. And looked over some stuff, but I kind of finally realized that we needed to develop a distributed storage as a public resource for all who care to connect to a public Wi-Fi network. They also, that present their own challenges and is a unique opportunity for the decentralized, currently incredibly centralized systems like internet service providers and internet protocol. Example ArcJet peer hardware setup. This is just at my home. I have a gigabit modem. I have a Synology 20 terabyte NAS from like 2013. It's in RAID 5. The setups like it might be able to help run the ArcJet network with cheap consumer grade hardware. The goal of high replication factor distributed network will reduce downtime in a properly balanced DHT with dynamic peer IDs and variable distance. If you want to learn more about DHTs, go to arcjet.com. In conclusion, sovereignty over your data can be hard and expensive. Blockchain taught us that. But dApps don't have to use blockchains exclusively. We have to be responsible and know where our points of trust are. Be aware of where we are centralizing, where the single points of failure are and what our attack surface is. Be honest and open with the community about these as well. These are problems we as a community are working to solve. I put forth that it's possible to solve the needs of DApp developers, users, and even engage with the community of amateur server operators to help grow and scale a secure network for data storage, even if you might not trust the server or the operators. By owning your crypto, by hashing and verifying signatures, it is possible to grow beyond blockchains and still trust the data placed on massively multi-tenant, even adversarial, and truly serverless data stores. Thank you. Here's a picture of my incredibly cute cat. His name is Spirit. You can reach out to me on Twitter. You can find the project artjet.com. You can go to our GitHub. It's developed completely in the light of day from day one. I've just been tooling around with it in open source. And most importantly, go ahead and build. Just like build whatever your passion is and work on it. And you know, there are many ways to work on and develop, you know, projects. You might not even need to have no code or know what a DHT is and all the intricacies of security. Just go ahead and put something out there like I did. You know, I'm not a security expert, but I went ahead and made a secure data store. At least I'd like to think so. And yeah, so I also have the inevitable, like, how is this different than X, in case anybody really cares to know or ask. I'll just leave that up there if you want to read all the different things that I looked at. Any questions? Hey.
So this is pretty cool. So so what you're saying is that whenever someone is being part of your network, they're being a node, whenever they get new data, they're always, like, regardless of how old it is or whatever, they're going to rehash that and check it themselves?
Correct, on the client.
That work?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, doesn't that slow everything down and cost a lot more to run your system?
Yeah,
of those nodes?
it's all part of, you know, having sovereignty over your data and being able to move beyond trusting just the server implicitly. So, you know, there's always going to be overhead, but it's definitely not the same overhead as, like, you know, a blockchain. And so, first of all, you kind of get this for free, except for the fact that you're paying server operators for that request, and the user doesn't have to pay that. That's going to be the onus on the site owner. And there's actually mechanisms I've documented on our GitHub for how we're going to make smart contracts for that to actually occur. They're basically based on logs of requests on basically a centralized server that we'll eventually work on decentralizing. But I definitely want to have this proxy server at and that anybody can run. But eventually, it's like you can absolutely run your own proxy server, your gateway server. But there has to be a gateway server that is kind of authority on making sure that all requests are logged, and then you can split up the pie at the end of the month and basically make a contract that allows funds to be distributed to server operators in your network and incentivize them to help participate. Good stuff. Any other questions? No? Okay, cool.
Next up, Kylan, come on up. Kylan is the co-founder of Blockchain for Sustainable Development, and currently is a proof of impact at Flux Token. Oops, sorry about that. Got a little preview.
Cool. Let me do this.
And he has a meetup tomorrow night, Tuesday, if you didn't hear that earlier.
Yeah. Sorry, we'll coordinate better with the crypto party to push this one back. Hopefully your brains aren't too full. That was awesome. So make some room in your mental RAM here. Yeah, so Blockchain for Sustainable Development, I actually started that around last summer, early, just as a way to get into this space full time. Traveled for about 6 months all over Southeast Asia, lived in Egypt for a while, throughout Europe, and is an amazing way to meet with a lot of impact projects working in this space, go to meetups all over the world, and then got involved with Flux early this year, and So today I want to explain why blockchain is an amazing tool for internalizing externalities in the market and why that is so important. And then how do we agree on what to value in this world? And that's a massive question that we're not going to answer today, but it's one we need to start having because that'll play an increasingly important role as we develop blockchains and cryptocurrencies that put different values on things, as well as in our artificial intelligence systems, what to define as goals to work towards. Why blockchain is the tool to make this finally happen, and how we're using proof of impact at Flux, pioneering that to incentivize quantifiable positive impact. So what is an externality? I think we're all pretty familiar with negative externalities in the form of pollution. There's also positive externalities. It's anything that a transaction between two individuals or a firm and a consumer makes that doesn't fully take into account all the other costs or benefits imposed on society. So negative externalities, right? Plastic bottles, those go into the ocean. We don't take that into account when we buy our 40-cent water bottle. Our purchasing decisions, right? Where does our food come from? We're not putting a value on how far it has to get there, the fossil fuels that takes, even noise pollution, light pollution, air pollution. Very, very acutely aware of all those negative externalities. And then there's also positive externalities that we're not baking into the markets. Right now, there's market premiums for certain things that have positive externalities in the world. Right? We pay more for ethically sourced products or fair trade certification, but that's a centralized certification agency that is very difficult to scale and again is decentralized or is not decentralized, so it's also not transparent. You have to trust into that certification agency, and it costs a lot to certify a certain agent to create that positive premium in the market. So anything from murals that affect us all psychologically beneficial. We're working with a project that is putting a value on urban trees. Anything from stormwater runoff, being able to quantify that, to the psychological benefits, reducing air pollution, reducing the heat island effect, and eventually I would like to see us putting more value on the morality of other animals as well. So what do we incentivize? What do we disincentivize? The UN Sustainable Development Goals were created in 2015 to kind of answer this question, because we're always going to have that value different things throughout society. That's why we have different political parties and different views, but these SDGs were baked down into 17 goals that every nation agreed on, at least the diplomats, and that's again is pretty centralized. But we have different targets and then indicators throughout each SDG, and these indicators are actually what we can quantify and then what we can incentivize. So each of those can be quantitative, and that's what we do at Blockchain for Sustainable Development. We use blockchain as that tool to be the incentivization layer. Why haven't these systems worked in the past to internalize externalities? Let's take the European carbon market that crashed in 2008 because of the financial crisis, but also there was the problem of double spends. You couldn't really trust the other parties to verify accurately that they were reducing or sequestering carbon, so the price was not scarce. It was nearly limitless, and no one trusted each other. So that's what B4SD is doing. Please check it out. We're partnering with a bunch of projects right now to do similar stuff to this, internalizing externalities, bringing blockchain to the NGO world. Okay, Flux, real quick, what we're doing there. We just published our white paper in our Telegram, so check it out, but real quick, it's distributed collection, distributed storage, and distributed intelligence. So we have an open hardware protocol. We have distributed storage that is kind of like Tor relays, and distributed intelligence with different perception engines to create insights for various things, working with in different realms. So we're collecting air, water, soil, human input, all these things that can be quantitative and verified by IoT sensors. And then we can create all these kind of outputs working with different projects that can certify carbon sequestration in livestock, for example, and then be able to put a market premium on that. So we're going to need this intra-realm communication to fix all these world problems right now. So we've created a Proof of Impact Fund, which is a token allocation and our commitment to creating impact. These are some of the projects we're already working on. Microfinance is a big piece, reforestation projects. Okay, running out of time real quick, but yeah, so we're doing this first with Flux. IXO is doing something fairly similar, but we're trying to make this a more open standard and an example of what blockchain projects can do, to instead of putting the value based on proof of work or gold or fiat currency, just our trust in that it is this kind of mythical object. What if we put that value, stem it from impact, and actually reward block producers for quantifiable impact created, or mint new tokens to those that are creating the most positive impact. So negative externalities that will require some input from governments and these bodies that currently have the monopoly on force and control. But the point and the future of this is to decentralize that, where we can actually create this ecosystem of thriving different currencies and blockchains that have their own different values and can evolve over time to put benefits on different positive externalities that each community values in turn. Microloans, that's also how impact goes directly to that. So we're partnering with a bunch of projects that are working on the UN SDGs, and we have funding to help them out. And within 5 years, I think every organization will become a lot more transparent, and those that don't will kind of fall by the wayside, or will be hacked and will become transparent, but not by their own choosing. And so kind of get on this train or be shown. Yeah, so this is the future that we're trying to create, where the costs will be privatized and the cost of doing business, the negative externalities. Right now we're producing far more oil and pollution than the market would currently support. So really this is a truer form of capitalism that takes all those things into account. And these are partners. And yeah, meet up tomorrow. We're talking about climate change. And yeah, so check out the Flux white paper and join our group on B4SD.
Alan, that was a thought-provoking topic. So you talked about the positive impact, right?
Yeah.
And what about the negative, as far as, let's say someone pollutes noise, like you saw, just the example of the jumbo jet, right? Let's say you had, how would you, basically, would you make a debit for that particular behavior?
Yeah, so this is where I think that the government does play a role, where I think this is a future of more decentralized governance. Once we as a society agree that we'd like to lower air or noise pollution, right, then the government or any governing agency for whatever community that is, whether it's seasteading or whatever, sets like kind of that limit, that threshold, and if you go over that, there's a cap and trade system almost, right? So if you're going over it, that's okay. Some things require creating more noise than an acceptable threshold, but that value needs to go back into the community in some way. And with something like carbon, that limit can constantly de-inflate, right? So right now we're producing X tons of carbon as a planet per year, well, we can put that into a deflationary schedule, and that be basically the limit. Anything more than that, you have to pay for, and then, yeah, just trade, and that way there's a thriving market. That's basically a floor price for these carbon sequesters or noise pollution sequesters, or yeah.
So I'm trying to understand the proof of impact.
Right.
Is it is like a potential application? Say you grew a new stand of trees, and you prove that those were alive and absorbing carbon, and that would somehow increase the value of some. I mean, is that the kind of concept, or am I
Right.
just stretching it too far?
No, that's actually exactly it, kind of. So for like the Flux protocol, we're working on a consensus mechanism called Algorand, actually, where it's kind of randomized block producers, but we believe there will be a way to weight that based on the impact created. So you don't know exactly who's going to be the next block producer, and if for some reason we can't make that work and have the security still, then we can still have new tokens minted or distributed from this impact fund to fund projects that are provably showing impacts. And if that's one of our values, reforestation or reduced air pollution or carbon sequestration that we agree on as a community, then verified through IoT sensors. And that process must be verified as well, right? So that's a lot more scalable than having a fair trade certification board go to every factory and certify that, or an organic produce certification facility go everywhere. You can just have an IoT sensor that can actually see whether there was like pesticides being grown on that through like a spectrometer or something. So that's the future we're trying to create. So that's a lot of stuff.
Thanks, Kyla.
Yeah.
Last presenter of the night. This is Dan Magny. He's a Denver Boulder ambassador of Hedera Hashgraph, and is the co-organizer of the local Hashgraph meetup. Dan is the past co-organizer of the Denver Bitcoin meetup in 2013 through 2015, when they met at the basement of the Southern Comfort Restaurant on 17th and Blake. Thank you, Dan, for giving a presentation on Hedera Hashgraph.
Hi, everybody. My name's Dan Magny. If I could just get a show of hands, has anybody heard of Hashgraph? Oh, that's great. That's good. And just out of those people, how many people understand it and just have like a high-level understanding of it? Okay, that's good. All right. Well, I'm going to be going through a full presentation of Hashgraph next month on the 18th. And Hashgraph is a project that's totally new. The science, the math, everything is new. The sort of social construct behind it, everything about it is new. So today I'm just going to go through just the basic of who the people are on it and just the basic technology. And if you want the full routine or rundown on it, I would ask that you come to the event next month. With Hashgraph, the first thing I wanted to put out to you is that it's new. The concept of how it's done is completely different. The approach was different. When Bitcoin came out, Satoshi was thinking about currency. When Hashgraph was started, it was started with the idea, let's see, these were the guys that started it. Lehman had read the book. Are you familiar with the book by Neil Stephenson, Snow Crash? So anyway, that was his inspiration. He thought it wouldn't be great to have something like the metaverse where you could have this real incredible throughput where everybody could be involved, where there was all this, and there would be this real incredible amount of fairness where everything was time-stamped and there was no sort of way to cheat in the entire system. These are the founders of the inventors of Hashgraph. These guys met as professors at the Air Force Academy. So once their background is in the military, in AI, machine learning, and computer science. It's kind of funny, you know, we have the internet with us today, and that was a defense project. So they're come out of that whole background of government science. So I'm not, this isn't quite. So what is Hashgraph is a way of having high throughput for a distributed ledger. And I think we could say right now, the holy grail for Bitcoin is scalability. Anything that's going to turn out speed is going to be a potential winner. So I'm going to go on and go to a little bit of a, they've got a, hopefully I have something here that shows what a hash graph looks like. For some reason or this isn't the one. Well, anyway, I can describe it for you. Hashgraph starts with a protocol where you have a node that sends out a transaction to another node, and the protocol is just simply called gossip. So one node sends to another, and then that node would send to other nodes on the network. So it's gossip, and then gossip about gossip. So the transaction, whatever the transaction, propagates through the network just instantaneously. Then after the gossip, there is what's called virtual voting. So the whole system can come to a consensus very quickly, usually within fractions of seconds. The test nets that have been out there for one node have been up to 500,000 in a second. With like 8 to 16, they've been to like 200 to 300,000 transactions per second. You know, this is I'm really sorry here, but I think I've got the. These are some of the companies that have gotten on board with Hashgraph. CU Ledger is a project that was bid on by Corda and IBM, and they won the contract for that. They beat them out for this. And then what they're doing is building like a blockchain distributed database ledger for them. So this whole thing with Hashgraph, their whole thing is speed, scalability. They also have a new governance model also. These guys coming out of the military, their whole thing is not to make money. Their whole background and sort of their ethos is chain of command. Can you have confidence in them? Lines of authority. I don't expect to have any sort of governance issue. They're going to actually form a governance issue board that's going to be much like Visa. Visa doesn't have any sort of government regulation. They just run themselves, and it's run through all sorts of members that are throughout the world. Hashgraph is going to have a 39-member board that's all going to be generally large companies that are going to be part of it. There's only 4 banks that are going to be part of the board. The members are going to be spread throughout the world, so no one government or one location can take the project over. And I'm a bit embarrassed here because I've got the wrong deck here. They sent me out a whole bunch of these things. So anyway, that's basically I've got another deck that's got about 70 slides in it that Mance Harmon, the CEO, did for Crypto Invest Summit last May. And actually that's good because I've sort of pretty much said everything I wanted to say. Now I can sort of throw it to you guys and ask for questions. So go ahead, shoot.
So what I'm gleaning from what you said is this is kind of like a private alternative to an open blockchain.
There's going to be 2 forms of it. You can have a private network. They're also going to have a public network. And the public network is in the test state, right? There's about 100 companies that are on the test net now for the public side. And you can apply for an API to run on the test net now. So if you have something that you want to try on that, and they're actually looking for developers to run projects on that. There are a number of projects that are in Ethereum that are being run there now. the first API that is going to be written, that's already written, that's being tested right now, is for a virtual machine for Solidity and Ethereum contracts. So you'll be able to have both. So like with the credit union, they're looking for an option beyond, you know, the banking system to move their money around. Anybody ever made a wire transfer to China or anything like that? It takes, you know, you pay. Yeah, right, exactly. So, and what do? They charge you. You send $10,000 and they charge you $150, and it takes all this time, and half the time they lose it. It's just, it's pathetic. But anyway, no, you can have. So if you have large corporations are going to be interested in this because they can have their own private system within, or they can be on the public. It's either or. Go ahead.
I mean, you realize that we like say sort of like Visa, that like to a like a blockchain group, that's kind of like saying, well, it's kind of like cancer. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's a little.
No, but what I'm talking about is we've seen governance problems, and we've seen people argue about stuff. There's got to be some way to handle problems and differences. And when the original Bitcoin group that I was with was Charles Hoskinson came and spoke, and I spent hours talking with Charles, just sort of on a guy-to-guy basis. And he was telling me that when he helped start Ethereum, he got it all started, and they got the money together to put it together, and they got it started. And he came into work one day, and they said, "Charles, you're out." You know, who's been fired like that? Everybody. I said, that's happened to me a few times. But anyway, Charles looked at Vitalik and goes, "Buddy, help me, because I'm part of this whole thing." And Vitalik goes, "Sorry, I can't help you. You know, you're out. You know." So these types of, and we've seen this with, what is it, Tezos? Who had the big lawsuit going? And then we've seen the problems with EOS. So anyway, you will not see this with Hashgraph. Hashgraph comes from a world of organization and building confidence, and they're looking for large corporate people to be on board with them. But that's not the only place. They're looking for scalability. That's their holy grail. That's the battle that they want to fight. They want to go after scalability because that's whoever really wins that fight and comes up with a way to really handle that.
Do you know if the transactions and the chain can be audited by anyone outside of the enterprises?
If it's private, no. If it's on the private network, no. If it's on the public network, yes. You'll be able to go through all that. That'll be all visible. And also the code is going to be completely open. You can look at the entire code. There won't be anything in there that's secret or hidden.
So the code is open source?
This is a very good question, and we'll go over it more on the 18th. The code is going to be out there so you can go through it. It's not open source. The code is patented. And the reason why they want to patent it is, I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback on this. The reason they want to patent it is so that it does not fork. I recently read an article about the New York Stock Exchange is planning on taking on all sorts of crypto assets. And there was a commentator that was saying, you know what, this is going to be a nightmare with the New York Stock Exchange taking on crypto assets because they will be repledging them and they will be lending them out and they will be rehypothecating them endlessly. And then on top of that, other people will be forking those assets after they've been rehypothecated. So there's a potential huge black hole, just another like what they had with Bear Stearns and all the mortgage blow up, all these other securities blowing up at a lower level. One of the projects that's thinking of things that can be done on the network like this, to give you an example, it's a Colorado company. The original funding came for Hashgraph through Ping Identity here locally. But to give you an example of the things that I'd be looking at, the Department of Defense gave a company up in Boulder a grant to figure out how to secure power plants from hacking. So they're actually going back and they're going to be implementing Hashgraph for securing Internet of Things devices within the power plant area. So if it works well, it's going to be something that's going to be rolled out as a standard. The reason why they can do that is because they're going to be able to push all this knowledge AI out to the edges of all these devices and have all the speed to deal with all those things quickly. So there's 3 other projects that are kind of in the stealth space where you mentioned they're kind of like the Skynet that have the AI and neural networks plus the blockchain in it all in one. So if you have time to come to the event on the 18th, I'm going to be going into all of these things in detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Well, everyone, thank you very much for coming out. That wraps it up for Decentralized for August. And our next one is October 1st. So again, we'd love to have you come out. And if you're interested to speak, please see myself or another one of us. Thank you again. Have a great night.
Hey, and while I still have your ear, if you like what happened tonight, ColoradoBlockchain.com is where you'll find a meetup almost every night. Kylan's thing tomorrow is on there. We've got, I think, tonight, tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, I run one. There's so much going on. So if you want to get more involved, please, yeah, check us out. Come find me or Will. Thank you. Do we have any other announcements? I think we got at least one pretty exciting one here.
Hey, real quick, Denver Startup Week. Today was announced formally the Blockchain Hub by SALT. So there's a lot of people that are actually involved in this room, but just so you know, on September 24th, it's going to be a program from noon until 7. There's going to be everything from, there's going to be something for everybody, basically from beginners in crypto to developers, as well as a social networking party. We'll have a cryptocurrency marketplace where you can onboard. We're working with some sponsors to get a bit of crypto. You guys already have crypto, but you can get a little bit more crypto loaded, and then it'll be at Booze Hall, which is basically they've got like a Colorado winery, they've got a moonshine distiller, they've got a bunch of different alcohol kind of specialty cocktail producers that are going to be there as a part of this event. So look for Denver Startup Week Blockchain Hub.
And then one last thing, I was thinking, Wyoming Hackathon. Have you heard about this? So this is really exciting. There's some very important people, especially in the Ethereum community. They're going to be in Wyo, and that's not this week, but next weekend. So 2 weeks from now, 7th through the 9th. I've got some flyers back there. If you're a dev, or really they're opening it up to anybody who'd like to do something related to something blockchain. I'll give you more information if you're interested. But it's really exciting to know Joe Lubin is going to be there, which is kind of a big name. Caitlin Long, who's some of the most important stuff has been going on in the legislation. She's doing this stuff up there, and it should be a fun time. And it's only like a 2-hour drive, so I figure we should have a large contingent of Coloradans and go. Blockchain. It'll be fun. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching.